بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. On behalf of CAIR, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to tonight's webinar. Thank you for joining us for this post-election debrief. We know that this particular election cycle has brought on many emotions. It's raised a lot of concerns for our communities, and particularly for Muslims and marginalized groups who know, unfortunately, all too well the fascist kind of policies that have come down from the previous Trump administration. But we want to reassure you that regardless of the outcome, we are here to come together to share our thoughts and to look forward to a future with resilience and with purpose. So today's discussion is intended to really offer insights and analysis of the election's outcomes and explore what this could mean for our communities. It's also about reaffirming the strength within our community and identifying positive and constructive steps forward. For questions, we have a great panel lined up tonight to offer their insights and perspectives, but we also want to provide an opportunity for you to be able to ask questions and share your insights as well. Please feel free to post any questions in the comment section and we will get to them as soon as we can. And with that, I will hand it off to our Government Affairs Director, Robert McCaw, and he will take it from here.
Thank you so much, Sister Zainab. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. And by the way, Sister Zainab, I think I have your technical fix. Just check your chat and then text Nihad. So with that, again, assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Robert McCaw. I'm the National Government Affairs Director. I am joined here with Zainab Chaudry. She is the Executive Director, the officer of CAIR's office in Maryland, CAIR Maryland, and she's put together an amazing panel. We have some great panelists joining me. So we have Sister Samya Mohammad, and she is she's with the CAIR Maryland Advisory Board. She's a member of that board. I'm also joined by Brother Jameel Johnson, with the Prince George's County Muslim Council. And I can tell you that both Sister Samya and Jameel have been very active in this election, especially in the Maryland community. And so we're really pleased to have them. And I'm also excited to right now introduce to you, live streaming to our audience, CAIR National Director, Executive Director Nihad Awad, who is the co-founder and Executive Director at CAIR, and he has been very involved with this election. So we're really great to have him join this program too. This election actually is a milestone for the American Muslim community when we talk in terms of engagement and involvement in national attention in our community. And I think that the importance of the Muslim vote has now been not realized just by some political pundits or candidates, but by the entire nation as we are on the stage. And how we vote can help determine the results of elections, like all other impacted minority communities. And, with us, again, I'm going to first kick it off to Brother Nihad Awad, who has been working to increase the Muslim vote for the 30 years that CAIR has been, founded. We're hitting our 30th anniversary already this year, and we have our 30th anniversary at the end of the month. If you're interested in attending our 30th annual banquet, I'd encourage you to go to cair.com. Sorry, little plug. But I remember I'll say this, when I joined CAIR in 2011, our goal was to first figure out how many Muslim voters there were. Then our next goal was in 2016, increase it to 1 million Muslim voters. And now we are over 2.5 million Muslim voters. And we are building a voting constituency that is incredibly active and engaged. So to first just give some analysis on the election and some words of advice, I want to invite Brother Nihad to really kick it off for us. Brother Nihad.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you, Robert. And I'm glad to be in the company of our esteemed co-panelists, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them. So to kick it off, I wanted to say, Alhamdulillah, I believe our community made history this year by making sure that people are paying attention to its concerns and taking note of its voting ability, voting power, especially those Muslim Americans who have registered to vote and voted in the swing elections. The election is over, but the work has again restarted. We have so many issues, regardless of who sits in the White House. We have so many issues and concerns that we care about. Above all, this year in particular is the genocide. The genocide has been, unfortunately, made possible, continued, armed, weaponized, justified with by our administration and with our tax dollars, and for many months with our silence and effectiveness. The anger that we have, the frustration that we have, made a dent in the attitudes of many politicians. I don't blame anyone who voted differently. In many families, there are people who different three ways. Some people voted for Jill Stein, some other people voted for Kamala Harris, and other people voted for Donald Trump, and others voted for Cornel West, and the list goes on and on. But the key thing is, I really would like to congratulate all our community members who saw to it that their voices will be heard, and I can assure you that your voices have been heard and you have been noted. See how many trips Donald Trump made to Michigan when Kamala Harris herself did not pay close attention to that constituency. Similarly, she was not willing to listen or change course from Biden. So that frustration really mounted and has caused the splitting of the Muslim vote around alternative candidates. And there are many people who voted for Kamala Harris. And that all is good. Why? Because if you voted for Kamala Harris, you voted because you believe in the agenda that she has, and also you believe that she will be much, much better and less dangerous than Donald Trump. For those of you who voted for Donald Trump, voted for a variety of issues, social and family values came to be clear for many members of our community, but also his claim that he is going to be the president of peace. I don't know if this will be achieved or he can deliver on this big promise. And many of you voted for Jill Stein because despite knowing that she was not going to win, but the protest vote was loud and clear. So eventually the dust settled, the results were announced, and we are facing what we planned for. The community collectively should stay united, because what motivated us, what mobilized us this year, like no other year, is really our frustration, and we want a better future for our people here, for our nation, and for Muslims and people around the world. And that's why we used our voice, our voting, because it is our power. Now, to move forward, President-elect Donald Trump will execute his agenda. If many of us remember, his agenda was brutal, was anti-Muslim, was anti-immigrant, was racist, and the list goes on and on. We survived under him, although it was brutal. And we knew how to push back, and we pushed back. We built coalitions with many communities and many organizations who stood with us, by us, shoulder to shoulder. I'm afraid that he will deliver on his threat to do mass deportation of undocumented people in our country. And this mass deportation will be draconian, will be brutal, will be violent, and will be based on racial profiling. Our community and many other communities will be highly impacted. And I would like to tell all our communities, allied communities, that we are together shoulder to shoulder. And we will defend you, we'll stand by you, regardless of who is in the White House. And I think it's important for our community leaders to understand this message, absorb it, process it, and implement it, and assure communities around the country, whether Muslim communities or non-Muslim communities, that we are going to stand by each other and we are going to defend each other's rights, dignity, and the right to be treated and not to be targeted, by this president and his agenda. I also have to note that Donald Trump has made some breakthrough with a segment of our community in Michigan. And he noted in his victory speech the importance of the Muslim and Arab American votes, among others. And this is the first time any presidential candidate after winning would praise any of our communities. We're not naive. We're not going to be taken for a ride. If he would deliver on his promise to show respect and bring peace, we welcome that. But again, if someone told you who's he, you should believe them. And he told us over the years, who is he? We are not closing the door. We are not going, as someone said today from our organization, we're not going to declare a war on him. We'll just wait for him to start his policies. Many of our community members are in touch and will be in touch with his team to make sure that it is toned down and to tell him that we are ready either for a fight or to cooperate to reduce his anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant rhetoric. Maybe that hope is not realistic. So as we say, we are cautiously optimistic, but also we have to be cautiously pessimistic. We cannot also be totally pessimistic. We just have to be vigilant. On the issue of Palestine, we know that his ideological alliance with the Israeli Likud government, and we know that they were hoping for his victory because of the lofty promises that he gave them, including the annexation of Gaza, the prevention of Palestinian refugees to come from Gaza. The list goes on and on. He himself said that Israel is too small. That's an expansionist colonial mentality that we have to stand against. So look, we have a lot of work to do, and CAIR will continue to be true to its mission to have the Muslim communities back and anyone's back who needs our help. Having said that, as I said, and I conclude with this, the Muslim community broke new glass ceiling this year with the number of registered voters, with the turnout, with the advocacy and anger that mobilized them. We just need to turn these emotions into institutions, into building infrastructure, and be ready to deal with the current president because he has still a genocidal legacy, and we need to work with him to prevent his destructive policy from continuing. Bernie Sanders has a bill in the Senate that will freeze the shipment of $20 billion worth of arms to Israel. We have to work on it, and we have to fight to save any Palestinian, any human being's lives. And as I said, the work will continue, and we need, as we have seen, to focus on our C4 organizations, PAC organizations, and the super PACs. So let's get ready and busy to even get ready for 2026, 2028 from now. But I am sure our community, inshallah, will continue to be engaged. So with that, I'm looking forward to hearing our panelists' views on this. And inshallah, until then, we'll continue to be stronger. And as Robert mentioned, we are looking forward to receiving all of you and hosting you at our 30th anniversary gala in Washington, D.C., November 22nd. It's going to be a Friday. We would love to see you, and that will be probably the biggest community gathering as a show of force until we, inshallah, say goodbye to this administration and move into working on our agenda for 2025.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. It's only been 5 years since COVID, and we all went to Zoom. Thank you so much, Brother Nihad, for those very insightful words. And I'm just gonna open it up to our other panelists with me. I'll just answer the questions at the end myself for my own views. But opening up to Sister Samya, following Brother Nihad's own insights, how do you think this election went? What are your interpretation of its overall results? Were there anything that surprised you in this election? What are your general reflections or advice? And then we'll get into the real questions.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for being here. I think, like everyone else, the election in itself was starting from when President Biden decided to not run. I think it's been a very new and rare thing because Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, only had 71 days to really get her campaign going. And when she announced that she was running and she was chosen, and there wasn't really a primary, there was a hope, I believe, in the Muslim community and within activists that there was an opportunity there, an opportunity where she could make herself be distinct from the Biden administration. And unfortunately, leading up to the convention and even after the convention, there was no sign or hope that she was going to do anything differently than President Biden to show that she was going to lead us in a different path when it came to many different things, whether it was Gaza or trying to do any kind of notions of possibilities of a embargo on weapons. There was no mention of anything that made her seem like she was a different candidate. It almost seemed she was Biden 2.0, which I believe not only hurt her within our communities, but also in different aspects, such as the economy, hurt her overall, as we saw with the polls. I think there was always a chance that Trump would win just because he did win in 2016 and we were all shocked. But I think what was shocking to me was we knew fairly early in the night that it was likely that she had no road to win the 270 electoral votes. It wasn't very late at night. It wasn't like at 3 a.m. We were sitting there not knowing. It was by midnight. I think most of us felt comfortable that he was going to be the next president again. And that really speaks to not so much the protest votes against what was happening in Gaza, but really just overall in the swing states that were important. Her messaging was lost on many voters. And what we have now seen is that it was really mainly white male voters and white female voters. And then he did have an increase in Latino male voters also, and doubled his male African-American voters who voted for him this time compared to 4 years ago. And the question is, what did her campaign do wrong? And I'm sure people will spend weeks and weeks dissecting where things went wrong. But for us in our community, I mean, the reason why many people probably did not vote for her or chose to maybe even not, either vote for Trump or vote third party was because of Gaza and the fact that there was a letdown that with her new name as being, the first female person of color to be nominated, it would have been such a historical moment for so many people to celebrate. And it was just a lost opportunity for the Democratic Party to embrace something beautiful with that. And it was and her story would have been something that we would have connected with, but because of her campaign not trying to meet with anyone in Michigan leading up to the election and not giving an inch to the Muslim community, I think that was a disservice. But the election that she lost, I would not say was because of Gaza alone. It was literally her campaign just did not take off in the right ways in the last few weeks. And President-elect Trump, he did what he does. He got his base out, and he did that. People were so upset by his rally leading up to the election, but what did he do? He motivated the people that he needed to go out to the polls. And what unfortunately Vice President Kamala Harris did the last few weeks was, run around Michigan with Liz Cheney and the Cheneys. Because I don't know, do you know any Republicans who decided all of a sudden they were going to vote for her because of a Cheney? And those are the questions that are going to be asked that, unfortunately the Democratic Party should have been able to win, but they made mistakes, and they made several mistakes not understanding how working class Americans in places like Pennsylvania, in places like Wisconsin and Michigan are feeling, and then definitely lost the votes in many of the Muslim communities in those states as well.
Thank you. And there's this constant theme actually more on social media by, I would say, some far less left activists that are trying to blame Muslims for Harris's loss. When Muslims for over a year said, if you do not listen to our community, we are not big enough to swing an entire election, but we can definitely tip the results. And we were one of many communities not listened to where this happened. And the other point that you brought up, where the majority of white voters voted for Trump, and yet it's a population of about 9 million that's getting blamed by some on the left is just striking to me. But I really do believe that you have to listen to these different constituencies and value their opinions, and you can't tell them um, that you have no alternative because the community had a three-way split in how it voted.
Yeah.
And so I also think that there's some on the very far left that think Muslims owe their vote to any party or candidate, and no one owns the Muslim vote. And every election has to be won over. And in every civic engagement training, and CAIR's a 501c3 organization, we do not endorse candidates. But I tell people, look at the candidate, look at their issues, and then reassess every election whether they're delivering. And so I think candidates will take note not to disregard the Muslim vote or other communities, whether it's Latino, African American, or others. So just something to consider. But Brother Jameel, I'm really interested, just because of your storied political career in DC, what your insights in the election were, and then we'll jump into some real questions.
Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's interesting to hear the, dichotomy of points of view in regards to, the Muslim role in this election and its effect on Kamala's loss. But I think you have to look at a few things. One is you can't both have, a group of people who are saying, it was the Muslims we did Gaza who were taking, credit for it. And on the other side, you have people who are taking blame for it. But the reality is, and, just like many people, but who are listening to this issue, 36 hours after, and not only with the presidential side, but with the Senate, and which, most experts expected Democrats to lose, but with the House, which they haven't lost yet, but it's going to take a hell of a comeback in these last few races for the Democrats to win the House, which tends to be an indication that it wasn't just the policies of one person. If you go back to 1992, the Clinton victory, what was the phrase? If you go back to the Jimmy Carter era, which I guess a lot of people listening to probably don't remember, the first thing is always the economy.
Yep.
Inflation. I go take my family out to dinner and I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. Most people vote first and foremost on kitchen table issues more than they vote on foreign affairs issues. And that's just a fact. It has always been a fact. Kamala, like Sister Samya said, she had a few things going against her. One was this, yes, a lot of people were just dissatisfied with the administration. Democrats seemed to pull together more, at least active party Democrats pulled together more when Biden finally dropped out, which they encouraged him to do. But people still didn't know Kamala Harris for the most point. Two, she couldn't separate herself and didn't make an effort to separate herself from the Biden administration. Like when she was asked and they ran that commercial over it again, what would you have done differently? And she said nothing. So there was no reason to separate, for people to think that she would separate herself from it. Three, and we also have to be for real about this, again, the majority, she only won 54% of the women's vote. And now, for instance, that African-American women probably voted for her. I don't see the final numbers, but it's got to be like 98%, right? And obviously there are more than just, what you call African-American women and white women. But again, you see where 2016 and 2024, white women voted again for a lying, adulterous, misogynistic male over a very qualified, educated female in 2016 and 2024. And if you're only going to get if a woman is only going to get 54% of the women's vote, she's going to have a problem. And like you said, the Latino vote, even after the whole Puerto Rican issue, the overall that Latino vote, particularly amongst Latino males, and even though she got the majority of African-American male votes, it still wasn't in the numbers that it needed to be. And these issues of, like I said, the economy, the border, she was not able to overcome. And I think the fact of it is, if we look at, I often talk to people about looking about the history of the United States and what its foundation is, forget all the flowery words. We're still in a mindset, this country's still in a mindset of it was built for European Christian males. And it's going to be very, very difficult for a woman, particularly a woman of color. I know Barack Obama was able to win, but sometimes it's also the timing. And Barack Obama was able to win when people were tired of the Iraq war and they wanted somebody different. He didn't have a bad Senate record. He was very charismatic. So people were able to say, okay, let's, go in a different direction. But as soon as he got in, within 2 years, you had the Tea Party, right? And then we got Trump. So there's always a very hard pushback in the other direction. And the last point I want to make is that, yeah, we're looking at this election, but we have to stop doing something that we in the Muslim community always do. We look at our political involvement every 4 years. And we usually start looking at it about 90 days before the election, as if we didn't know there was going to be an election 4 years before that. Any one of us can point to you when the next presidential election is going to be going into eternity as long as the United States stands. We have to be ready for it. And we can't just wait for major issues such as 9/11, the Muslim ban, or Gaza to say, now it's time to get active. We have to build a political infrastructure right now. And we have to realize that if you can't have a strong influence on local issues, which are a lot easier, you're not going to have but so much influence on international issues. So we've got to start right here in our neighborhoods where we live. We have to get the imams getting people to understand that it is part of their responsibility as Muslims to help change the environment around them for the better. And here that is through the political civic process.
Well, I would always like to say the most remarkable thing about the Muslim voter is they're unremarkable, in that one of the trending search trends on the day of the election was, did Joe Biden drop out? So I think the community was just a little bit ahead of the average American on that, where we were intensely looking at the candidates. But I 100% agree. And we heard Brother Nihad say this, that the work for the next election starts the day after the last election. And we have a new ecosystem in the Muslim community where we have the rise of the Muslim we had C3s 30 years ago, and we have professionalized in the last 30 years. And now we see the rise of the C4, and we see C4s creating their own affiliated PACs and super PACs. And I think in the next 2 years, you're going to see the Muslim community learning how to drive these new vehicles. And it will take some time, but I do see the rise of Muslim political action in the way that we haven't seen in prior elections. And I think this election, we came a little late to the game. I think we did some excellent work, though. But it's all about creating these institutions. And so I'm gonna take that question back to Sister Samya, and I'll ask you, Brother Jameel, and I'll jump back to Brother Nihad again. But
do we have Zainab? Do we have Zainab Chaudry on?
Oh, yes, we do.
Yes, I am on, Brother Nihad. I'm not a panelist, though. I'm moderating behind the scenes. So
I need to hear you too. Okay.
I'm glad to chime in here as well.
She's the glue that's keeping this whole program together, feeding me notes from behind the scenes.
Okay, thank you.
That deserves a pay raise.
I would ask, and please, Sister Zainab, feel free to jump in. But how effective do you think CAIR's have affected, do you think the Muslim community's outreach was during this election cycle, mobilizing Muslim voters? Do you think that we inspired Muslims to turn out? Do you think we had more Muslim candidates run for office? What was lacking? What was great? What can be improved on? We'll start with Sister Samya, go to Brother Jameel, and hit Nihad.
Okay. So I think CAIR was very effective in promoting, even before the general election, like in the primaries, making sure that people understood how to how to vote, when to get registered. I think there were clear C3 guidelines and voter guides that were sent out. There was text messages and phone messages sent. And I think the community, at least in Maryland, did feel like an urgency that this election was important. In the spring, there was an importance because of the uncommitted campaign that was happening nationally, and then also in Maryland. And then in the general election for the state of Maryland, there was this sense of the presidential race was not as important in Maryland because we are traditionally a blue state that does go Democratic, and there was no question of who was going to win our state. But there was a Senate race that was very important. So now we have a new senator who's coming in, who's county executive, also Brooks. So that was a race that people particularly did care about, especially because she was going against former Governor Larry Hogan, who really has spent much of the election cycle promoting and making it very well known how pro-Israel he is and how much he stands with Israel. And I think that was something that was really important for the Muslim community, to make sure that they went out to the polls to, get their voice heard when it comes to that Senate race. Otherwise, I don't think the presidential, there was a question of who's going to win or not win. And I think because of that, there was a good sense of people having the opportunity to really look at the local races. And I think the C3 CAIR did put out a voter guide and had questionnaires in the primary, so people had the opportunity to understand the different candidates that were running. So I do think that CAIR did a very good job to motivate the community and to give the community an opportunity to learn about the candidates, learn about the issues, the voting record, and to help with just understanding, simple things like, when do you have to register by? When do you have to switch parties to be able to vote in the primaries, as some people in the community are independents. And when you're an independent in Maryland, you cannot, really impact the primary because you can't vote in the Democratic or Republican. And for the state of Maryland, the Democratic primary would be the one that people would want to vote in, because there's a greater chance that that candidate is likely going to win in November. So hopefully that I thought that was a important aspect of what CAIR did this year. And I think the community in Maryland has been engaged since last October, really engaged in everything that's happening nationally and also the local level with ceasefire activities. So I think we have a community that's very alert, very enthusiastic in wanting to learn and to be involved in any way. And our proximity to DC allows us to be able to go to DC and to lobby our senators and Congress men and women in person, and to have meetings. And we saw a lot of that happening in our communities in Maryland, not just with our leaders who lead organizations, but just everyday people in the community were picking up the phone and calling and wanting to set up those meetings and wanting to have those conversations. So I think there was a lot of engagement. And alhamdulillah, I think CAIR did a very good job in helping that, cultivating that.
Thank you. And Brother Jameel, how would you grade the Muslim community's ability to get out the vote this election cycle?
I think we're improving. I'm a person who's not easily satisfied until we win. Let me say, in regards to CAIR, first of all, the benefit is everybody knows CAIR's name, right? So that's a start. So you understand who it is that you're talking to, or who you're hearing from when you hear CAIR's name. And that goes back to the work of people like Nihad on the national level, the various chapters. There's probably no Muslim voice that is heard as much. You look at on social media, who the media picks up more than anybody, than there is CAIR, which is very important in building an institution, the ability to get to the media and get your voice heard so people can hear what you're doing. And Sister Zainab, since she started, became the leader of CAIR Maryland, has always kept us up on various issues, what's coming about, things that a lot of us, myself included, who are volunteers and have regular jobs, cannot always be aware of unless there's somebody out there doing the work to make us aware that we have to be involved in kind of laying the groundwork for us to take action. So that is critically important. Now, the interesting thing with Maryland, it's true part of the DMV as a whole, is that you have a more politically sophisticated population across the board because of where we're located, and the fact that half of us work in the industry in one way or another. Whether we're directly industry, whether we're contractors to somebody who's doing business with the government. Or the case would be like, I know a certain amount about DC politics, even though I've never lived there, just because I have to go to work there and I get their commercials and everything else. So I can't help but by osmosis learn a certain amount about DC and Virginia politics because of my proximity to it. I think that one thing I was very glad to see about, and Sister Samya already brought it up, was, we're talking about the presidential election in so many different ways, but we did something very important here in Maryland. And we took, the county executive, who was not known statewide up until this point, and put her against first a member of Congress who is who's a billionaire, who was able to put, he had enough money in his own campaign that would have funded all of our organizations, right? And made us very powerful organizations just in the money he took out of his pocket and put into his campaign. He outspent her by more than 10 to 1, about 11 to 1. And she was able to beat him, including in his own county. I mean, you would expect her as the county executive of Prince George's to beat him there, but she beat him in his own county. Then we went against a 2-term governor who was very popular and beat him by number. And obviously it's never done by ourselves. That's an important part of coalition building. But the point is that the Muslim community came out and, jointly, many of us who do have 501c4s endorsed her, worked for her, and we got that victory over 2 people, one who is not just funded by AIPAC, but is a funder of AIPAC. That's the kind of money he has, and a former governor who came out right and said, I will be the best friend that Israel has ever had. And so that's, a very direct victory that we should be proud of, but we have to build on. We are still far too low in our voter registrations and our voter turnout and our activity. It's not enough to endorse candidates. You have to help them win financially, knocking on doors, making phone calls. That's how you also become a more effective community. Even if your numbers aren't small, they will know this community actually came out and helped me. So what can I do for them?
You just have to keep on repeating that message in the community till it sticks. I'm going to ask Nihad the same question on just not CAIR, but generally the Muslim community. How did we perform this election season, getting out the Muslim vote, educating Muslim voters? I'm going to quickly answer 3 questions that have appeared in the Q&A just so we can keep this running. First question was, how do you track Muslim voters, especially if they don't have a Muslim name? First, we are able to track Muslim voters by either single or double name matches. And we're able to track Muslim voters sometimes by nationality and a combination of other factors. So if you have ethnically Bengali or Afghani heritage, there's like a 98% chance that you are at least from a Muslim family. And if you have Muslim names and other characteristics, we can track that. There are also private vendors that will literally look at the magazines you subscribe to and the other things you subscribe to on social media, and they develop religious profiles on people. They sell data points on almost every American to these large voter data vendors, and we're able to pull lists of Muslim voters as best we can. I will say, number one, you will not necessarily find Robert McCaw on a Muslim voter data file, but if you tracked my household, you would find a Hamza McCaw, a Zainab McCaw, and well, I'll say just my wife's first name, Sabine. And we can then pinpoint and say, well, there's a high certainty that that person's also Muslim. And so there are better programs out there right now being developed that identify not only Muslim voters, but the households they live in and the probability that those people are Muslim. So it's getting better. Also for African-American converts, if there's just, one Hakeem Jeffries in a household, maybe Muslim, maybe not. But if there's a Hakeem Jeffries and a Jamal Jeffries and, a Zainab Jeffries, well, now we might hit it. And I think that we're getting better at figuring out where Black Muslim voters are, but we're not there yet. And that's why we also work with coalition groups like the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations and their partners, like the Mosque Cares Network. And we really do rely on these groups amplifying messaging. And the final thing is, targeted uses of social media. can be somewhat helpful in messaging to Muslim voters. So just kind of a great question on how we identify Muslim voters. There's a related question. Why is it so expensive? Well, first to contact Muslim voters, and not only do you purchase these data files, and the data files themselves can be relatively inexpensive. You can build a file of Muslim voters for anywhere between $10,000 and $30,000. But housing them in a database can be quite expensive, especially if it has the software and tools where you're identifying these voters, cutting sheets of territory that you want to do robocalls, text messages, door knocking. The technology is definitely being democratized and it's getting cheaper, but it still costs about $0.015 to 3 cents for every text message. And when CAIR sent 600,000 text messages over the weekend, that cost us about $17,000, and that was done through community fundraising. And so it's expensive to be involved, but it's a necessity if you want your community to build power. And so I just wanted to answer those two related questions because I thought they really came together. And the final question I'll answer now, and I'll answer the next one soon, is there are over 2.5 million Muslim voters across the nation. Probably almost 3, but not 3 yet. So with that, Brother Nihad, how do we all do? Also, I might be getting this during my annual review. So,
yeah, I mean, like what Brother Jameel and Sister Samya said, yes, we should not be satisfied where we are, but also we have to celebrate the successes that we have and build on them. One thing is needed in our community is really to normalize political involvement. When we see imams, when we see community leaders, celebrities in our communities, prominent people, do not only talk about religion and their areas of focus, but they should start talking about local issues and issues of importance to the general public and to our communities combined, not only the so-called traditional Muslim issues. When there are local elections and you see the imam standing after every salah saying, hey, by the way, we remind you, there is a local election, there is a special election, and here is the deadline. They can do that and should do that, minus, obviously, endorsing candidates or opposing candidates, because that is a C3 area. Secondly, our community needs to reprioritize spending. We have been rightly spending a lot of money on important relief work abroad and even sometimes here. This is important and we should not stop it, but we should be more strategic. Instead of, for example, if you donate $500 every year for a relief organization, why don't you donate $100 or maybe $150 for political work, for a candidate locally? I personally believe sometimes the political money that we spend in our local politics could save lives, the lives that we are trying to rehabilitate, or maybe could prevent parents of people who, get orphaned. That's what most of our relief organizations do. We ship money abroad to deal with the symptoms of our policies here. If we spend 20% of the money we spend on relief work abroad, this will be tremendous, wise, smart, and effective investment. If we change a policy in the US government that ends up not sending a 2,000 ton or pound bomb that may kill, let's say, 15 families, saving one life is the equivalent of saving an entire humanity. So I think recalculating our zakah, our money, is important. And I will be very sad if our community continues to spend billions of dollars on relief work for good purposes, that those purposes can be eliminated by having more political effectiveness and smart money spending here on our politicians. And finally, I'm so proud of the Muslim community in Maryland. Although I live in Virginia and I should be biased towards the Virginia crowd, but I have been impressed with the organizing level of the Muslim community in Maryland. I was stunned by the amount of dedication and the kind of leadership in organizing the community and other communities to come out, for example, and work on the school issues. You made not only national news, you made international news, and politicians heard you. And I was impressed with the meticulous organizing and maneuvering of which person sits on the education board and how you want to work with them. Right now, we should, strategize who these people should be and who should not. So all politics is local. Last thing I would say on the issue of Palestine, the other side managed over decades, over generations, to make Israel a domestic issue, although it's a foreign policy matter. But they really managed to make it at the table of every discussion with every politician. And that's why you see politicians are just, over each other, trying to please the other side. Our community should make justice in the Muslim world and Palestine a local issue, because all these politicians, no matter which and where they sit, they have that position, and they announced it during the genocide to pledge allegiance to the other side, to the pro-Israel, groups, and the Muslim community could hardly find any friends. So building friendship, even at a local level, for a local issue, may end up being an investment for you for a bigger political issue in the future. I'm done. Robert?
My sincere apologies. I have
looks
a
like-
screaming child and I did not want to interrupt the program. This is where work and life find a balance. All right. Well, I want to just say that CAIR sends me across the country to train communities. And I can obviously say that in Maryland and in Virginia, there's a level of sophistication. So we're all patting ourselves on the back, but it's an example that I use for other communities when I get there in the heartland, and I can point to the activities we're doing and the accomplishments and what we set as like just the bare minimum of engagement that we have to do. It becomes the goal for other communities. So I would say, feel like Brother Jameel, don't get too impressed with yourself. Keep on striving for excellence. And we're going to set a really high bar for the nation. Moving forward, how do you foresee the results of this election affecting local policies that are going to impact our community directly? And this could be from local races, or this could just be straight from the administration or Congress. I view some of the proposed policies of the Trump campaign to pose a potential threat, existential threat to the Muslim community's organizations. I'm very concerned where they're trying to tap down on they're trying to tamper down on pro-Palestinian human rights rhetoric, anti-genocide rhetoric, criticism of Israel, that they could go after nonprofit organizations, especially their movements in Congress to introduce legislation that could revoke the nonprofit tax status of groups based on allegation but not actual charges. A bureaucratic nightmare for me. And there's a number of referred investigations by 3 separate committees in the House right now. If there's Republican control of the Senate, I'm afraid this could expand. And so I am concerned of the politicization of the political speech of Muslims, because we have a right to say it, but we really we should not have discrimination from government bodies of what we can and can't say, or what our organizations can or can't say. So that's a concern I have, but I don't know the extent that the Trump administration will do that, and I don't know how far Congress will go. What I am most concerned about right now is the administration going after undocumented immigrants and doing it in such a broad manner, especially that they will be rounding up Muslims too. And so I want to be an ally to anyone that's undocumented, but I also want the Muslim community to be prepared that there could be a level of profiling that happens, that we have to do know your rights trainings, that we have to reteach our community members what to do when there is federal law enforcement or a local sheriff's office working in a 527G program that's been deputized to do immigration actions. We're going to really have to train our community in knowing what to do. And so these are concerns of mine about, the outcome of the election, whether it's policing our speech or really protecting ourselves and knowing our rights. But with that, Sister Samya and Sister Zainab, I would really like you to chime in on this too, if you could, and Brother Jameel.
So I think that we can all agree that a Trump administration will be very dangerous to not only the Muslim community, but to all communities that are minorities or marginalized, persons in this country, with the rhetoric he uses and with the policies that, were brought up during his campaign and what we remember from his last, when he was president last. I don't think we can, no memory of those 4 years reminds you of anything but other than being constant stress of what was coming, what was next. But at the same time, I don't want to catastrophize and just because I don't think we will get anywhere. I think one of the things that I've been trying to do in the last 24 hours is just remind myself that we survived the last time, right? We survived. And how we survived was not because of the politicians, not because of the administration, not because of anyone in Congress. It was because I'm okay, you're okay. We took care of each other. Our communities came together. Different communities came together, and that was the unity against the hate that was coming from Washington then. And that is the only thing that's going to bring us together and is going to help us get through the next 4 years. I think that being in solidarity with other people who are not only oppressed internationally, but oppressed when we really think about it within our own communities, being in solidarity with them is what's going to get us through in the coming weeks and months and years ahead with the new administration. I think that when we look at the last 4 years with the Biden administration, we still had an immigration issue. We still had undocumented immigrants being treated, not well. We did have still a crisis at the border. So these issues become more raised because we have the president-elect that chooses his words in a way that is inflammatory and brings it to light in a way that is more vitriol. There's a lot of hate in it. The issues have always been around. It's to the forefront. And I think we all become more reactionary when we have someone who's constantly giving us that kind of messaging. I don't know if you've heard, but in the last 24 hours in states like North Carolina, African Americans, college students have received text messages about being slaves. This is a reality not just of what the administration is going to do. My concern really is with what his followers will do and feel that they can do now that they're empowered with this victory. And I think that's going to be very difficult and challenging within our own communities to protect our students from doing the pro-Palestinian work they're doing, but even just being Muslim and being visibly Muslim. I think that's going to be a conversation that needs to be had in our community. But when it comes to what he's going to do and not do, I think one thing we know with Donald Trump and we've learned is that he centers himself 100% of the time. And so a lot of what he's going to do is going to be elevating his own voice and making sure that everything comes back to him. And we need to, as a community, understand that we just have to stick to our own principles and identify the things that we can see that's going to harm our community, but also harming our neighbor, and reaching out to those allies and standing up for them when it happens, so that if something were to happen to our community, that is reciprocated. And that's all we can do. And, as Muslims, and forget the policies, as Muslims, we believe everything happens for a reason. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is his will. So we may not see the good, we may not see the bad in the situation. Allah knows best. So I think if we just put our, first put our trust in Allah, but then do the work that's necessary to have the tools so we have CAIR. And I think that this is going to be an opportunity for our community to make sure we're utilizing the resources to be informed on what our rights are, what is not supposed to happen in the school. And if something were to happen in a school or in a university setting, who do we reach out to? Where do we go with these issues? And I think this is where an educational aspect that's going to be needed in our communities, and also tools to be able to make sure that if there is hate biases happening in our community, they get recorded. A lot of times we hide these things, we don't share it, and people don't realize how important it is to reach out to a school administrator, reach out to your public official, reach out to somebody to say this incident happened. Because if it doesn't get documented, it doesn't happen, and people do not know that there is Muslim hate out there. And we need to be vigilant, and we need to be not reactive, but actually working on creating an environment where people feel, have the feeling that they can use their voice, even in a situation where you have a Donald Trump presidency, that you can still speak up and say, what is going on is wrong, or this is a policy that's impacting, or someone personally is treating me in a way that shows that they're having anti-Muslim hate or Islamophobic behavior. Because if we don't do that, then the media is not going to cover it, and we become voiceless. So I think there's three folds to this. It's one, within our communities, we need to be empowered to not allow anyone to do just anything to us without raising our voice. And then we also, as a community, need to make sure that when another community is being impacted by the policies of Donald Trump, we are one of the first people to reach out and to say that we are going to stand in solidarity. And I think within our communities, being able to do that is what's going to help us and allow us to be able to get through the next 4 years.
Thank you. And just because we've heard so much of what our perceived threats are, and I want to respect that we have about 30 minutes left, instead of asking that question for all the next panelists, and because we have 2 more CAIR representatives here, I'm just going to ask the question to Brother Jameel, Nihad, Zainab. What is your plan for the next 3 to 6 months? What are your priorities as community organizers? What are you first doing to either, better empower, ensure, strengthen the Muslim community so that we're in the right position for the upcoming administration, Congress, nation? We can hit Brother Jameel.
Okay. A few things. One, it's November 7th now, right? So it is time to go back to strategic planning. So our priority in PGCMC is to begin strategic planning again, as one always should be doing, about what is the most effective way we can become a stronger organization. And not only for, both in the county here, but also how we can work better with other Maryland organizations to strengthen ourselves there. How we can, look at each of us and our roles as an organization. What are the roles of the groups on the local level? What are the roles of the group on the state level? How do we better coordinate, particularly on those joint issues, like when we're lobbying the state? Like we had a very good lobbying day we've been having for years, and they're getting better and better with the state last year. How do we become more effective so that when we're doing that joint things, each of us has enough of our own elected officials in our area on board to help get things passed? It's important that we also continue raising funds because of the fact that we need to have staff on board. This is one thing, like somebody in the chat said, what can you do to help? We have to fund these organizations. We cannot just keep, I have, we have people, I'm sure everybody does, people who fuss at us. You should do this, you should do this, you should be this kind of thing, you should do that kind of thing, yet don't put an ounce of support into the organization that they're asking to do something. And the fact of the matter is that you've got to have staff because they need to keep an eye on things, they need to be responsive, they need to develop plans. So raising those funds so that we can put people on staff is critically important. Brother Nihad mentioned that earlier, and I'm going to say something that was said at Prince George's Muslim Association one day in discussing the Gaza issue from a person whose family is from Gaza. He said, the humanitarian assistance is going to get there. He said, if you're spending $10, if you're willing to spend out $10 to support Gaza, he said $9 should go to an advocacy organization. Because eventually the humanitarian assistance will get there. That'll come from different places. But if we can get organizations that we develop to support and affect policy here, then we can really get something done as opposed to always, waiting until something happens. But also our plans, voter registration. We've started already. We have a voter registration committee who we meet with the imams of the masajid in Prince George's County every quarter. And our big focus for them is we've got to be able to register people to vote. We've got to be able to show elected officials the power that we have in the county. One thing we did after the 2022 election cycle, I say 2022 because in the state of Maryland, every 4 years off the presidential election cycle is a big election cycle for us in Maryland. And we're able to show, just by doing a quick look at the votes, you have 3 state delegates in each district, which means the top 3 winners, the top 3 vote getters win the seats. You've had people who lost the seat by 19 votes, by 25 votes, those kind of numbers like that. I can guarantee you I've got at least 25 Muslims who can win, who can vote in that district, showing our ability to have an effect. And once you can do that, then it's like, okay, what does the Muslim community need? Like I said, it's not enough to just say, we endorse. You've got to show your ability to affect and then go out and get that done. So that's, a lot of our plan. And I have no doubt that the Muslim organizations, as we met shortly before this election, we're going to meet again. I'm going to push for it. And we're going to say, hey, and I have no doubt that Samya is going to push for it and Zainab's going to push for it, that we're going to meet again and say, okay, who are we? Where are we? The words I use, and they've heard it from me before. So I'm just humor me for a minute, ladies. We have to become like pieces of a puzzle, right? And each piece of the puzzle fits together so that you have one complete picture. An end piece can't become a middle piece can't become a center, can't become a corner piece, so that we're working together as fluently as possible. And my big thing, I believe in the, as I'm sure we all do, in the ayat, vie with each other as in a race for the doing of good deeds. So I tell our people at PGCMC, I want us to be the best organization. But I want all the other organizations to be great too, with us being a little bit better than that. I want Maryland to be, Nihad said he was jealous. I want to make him more jealous. All right. So that Maryland is the best and most effective, civil political state of Muslims, while Virginia keeps improving itself too. So ultimately, we're all successful. It's like wanting to be the best player on the team, but everybody on the team wins the championship.
I think that's amazing insights into the planning process of a leading community in our nation. Sister Zainab, Brother Nihad, maybe you can kind of answer this together, but Brother Nihad, at the national level, what's your perspective for the key priorities of engagement and preparedness as we look for the next 3 to 6 months? Sister Zainab, following that answer, what are you looking to do at the local level to really implement this type of vision of action?
Well, from my perspective, on the national level, and yes, Jameel, I'm not jealous of Maryland. I will continue to root for Maryland, although I am in Virginia. So it comes from alhamdulillah, space of admiration for the community in Maryland. And yes, I will encourage our community in Virginia to compete, inshallah. So, but for us at CAIR National, our plate is already full. It's full with 8,000 civil rights cases that we are working on. And the number of our attorneys are way, way short than meeting those requirements. Who are these people? Many people who lost their jobs because they spoke out against the genocide, whether in the medical field or in the educational system. So many students have been suspended, arrested, and charged. Alhamdulillah, we've been successful in negotiating and convincing a good number of prosecutors in different states at different universities to drop the charges. So that struggle for assuring and assisting the student movement is of paramount importance for CAIR. We have sued the governor of Texas and the universities in Texas who promised to shut down SJPs. The same way we succeeded in filing a lawsuit in Maryland to remind the administration, the university administration, that the First Amendment is a red line. So we have many red lines that we are going to protect, and we will not allow people to cross. And that is really the biggest thing that we have on our plate. Plus, the potential targeting of not the potential, but the actual targeting of organizations like AMP and SJP and other organizations. Already they have been entangled in frivolous lawsuits, and they are being threatened with draconian legislative actions, and also intimidation and pressuring the IRS to take the status of certain nonprofit organizations. That is a fight that CAIR will continue to lead, and our promise to the community is we're not gonna step aside. This is our fight on your behalf, and we need your dua, your continuous support. The third thing is we are monitoring still the situation with this current administration. We're not giving up on this administration. Biden is still our president, and Kamala Harris is still our vice president. And they are the ones who are supplying and arming the genocide. We have a lot of work in the next couple of months to work with them to give, at least make him, feel the heat, and also hopefully they will have common sense and end their legacy of genocide. And fourthly, we are getting ready for this new administration and its attacks on human rights of many minorities. And we are reaching out to them to say, we are one wall. We will be working together, and we are ready for that. And fifthly, and lastly, but not least important, is to prepare our communities to be more engaged on the local issues. We've seen that those who make it to Congress are already working on the local levels. And they are, for example, in the State House or Senate House. And the good news for me personally, I have a goal to help the 43 Muslim state delegates to become members of Congress in the next 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years. We have 4 people now in Congress, inshallah. I'm looking forward to having 30 members of Congress who are Muslim. And those are already there. They are at the state and Senate level, at the state House and state Senate. And those people need our support. They need our mentoring. They need, us being for them and with them. So CAIR's agenda is already busy, and we're going to be more busy. Obviously, I'm not endorsing any candidate now, but I'm saying, in terms of empowering the next generation of American Muslims to be public servants and to serve our community and the rest of our communities, inshallah.
Inshallah. And if for those that are interested, there is now a 4th Muslim member of Congress. She gets inaugurated in January. Her name is Latifa Simon. And I dropped the link to CAIR's press release giving more information about her. So we're really excited. She is an amazing sister that has had a long history of engaging with the community out there. And we're very happy to have another, social justice advocate out there who understands the Muslim community, is a part of the Muslim community, but also has done the work to defend all impacted people and, aspires to serve the needs of all her constituents, regardless of who they are or where they're from. So we're really excited about just continuing to have all these great Muslim members rise up, and 45 with over 45, probably now 50 Muslims in state legislatures. We're going to crack those numbers on our next Muslim directory. There's a bright
to that point, future. Robert, there's a question in the chats. Is there anything CAIR Maryland could do to help us down in District 1? Andy Harris keeps winning. So as a 501c3, obviously we can't endorse candidates running for public office. But one of the burning questions right now is that what are you willing to do? What are you willing to sacrifice? And especially within the Muslim community, mashallah, we have so much talent, we have so much potential, and we truly want to encourage more and more Muslims to run for office. Not even on a state level, on a local level, because oftentimes it's just a local races where you can stand to have the most impact. And if you're looking for information on how to get civically and politically engaged, absolutely, we are more than delighted to hold trainings within your community to help share that information. But just to add to what Brother Nihad mentioned on the state level, part of what CAIR is doing in Maryland is that we are actively working to strengthen our coalitions. In fact, the first call that I received on the day after the election was from a rabbi who built with us and mobilized with us after the Muslim ban was enacted under the previous Trump administration. And one of the first questions that she had was, how can we organize together? And she, it was a conversation that really kind of reminded me of how much work we can do to really truly intersectionally advocate for all of our communities, because obviously it's not just the Muslim community who's going to be impacted by this administration. And that, in addition with also working with and collaborating with elected officials on every level of the government, is another piece of the puzzle that we are working on. Yesterday, CAIR was part of the Civil Rights Advisory Group with the Attorney General's office. And, during that conversation, one of the points that Attorney General Brown raised was that during the previous Trump administration, his office took 93 actions against bills that came down or policies that came down the previous Trump administration. And they're expecting that that number is going to more than double in this next administration as President-elect Trump comes into power. So the point being that there's going to be obviously a lot of work cut out for us. And so he was asking us, what kind of issues we wanted to prioritize as a coalition who was part of this advisory group. And obviously the First Amendment protections is the main concern, because we have been receiving a lot of complaints from students on college campuses and in high schools whose First Amendment free speech rights have been infringed upon. And for CAIR, it's really a source of pride to see the way that the students have risen up in this moment and really taken ownership of the role that they play to advocate for their own rights and hold university officials and school administrators accountable, and demand that they provide that space for them to be able to advocate, conscientiously without feeling that they have to silence themselves. But leveraging those relationships with state partners, with local partners in government, with elected officials, along with building coalitions, stronger interfaith coalitions, truly is going to be part of like a very robust strategy that we're developing in Maryland, inshallah. And the question that I really want to encourage all of you to ask yourself tonight is, what are you willing to give up, right? What role are you willing to play in being the change that you want to see within your community? Because even though there are a lot of, very difficult challenges that lie ahead, there's a lot of opportunities too. And, we, inshallah, are very much looking forward to working with all of you to continue advocating and building American Muslim political power, and inshallah, inspiring a new generation of Muslim leaders to run for office. On the local level, especially, that I believe in local board of education races, we had quite a few Muslims across the country who won those races. And in Maryland, mashallah, like having the opportunity to work with so many students, we see the passion, the potential that students have, and being able to leverage that in a constructive way is really something that we want to build on. But we'd love to hear your ideas as well. So I'll drop my email in the chat as well. So if you have any suggestions, we'd love to hear that as well.
Yeah, and Brother Jameel, please drop the Prince George County organizational email website if you want, if you haven't put that in the chat yet. Sister Samya, if you have any organizations besides CAIR that you're plugging that you think are working good in Maryland also.
Yeah, it's already in the chat.
All right, great. I encourage everyone also to continue to go to CAIR's website at cair.com, to check out our banquet, to look at our subscription options for providing, getting daily doses of news and action alerts. CAIR didn't become the most often quoted Muslim organization overnight. We every day monitor the news. We look at policy issues on the Hill, and we respond with anywhere between 5 and 7 press releases from either our CAIR chapters, something happening locally, or something happening nationally. CAIR doesn't, throw spaghetti at the wall and sees what sticks. We bake lasagna and we drop it on your carpet. So, just get the information from CAIR. Sorry, silly analogy, but it works, and it's visual. We have about 10 minutes left. I really would like to answer some questions from the audience because we did promise a Q&A. I want people to ask as many questions as you can. We'll try to answer them rapid fire as best as possible. I am going through the Q&A right now, and just to kick us off, someone said that they strongly recommend building bridges and forming alliances with other minority groups, example, Asian Americans, Latino Americans. I can say that, CAIR works at the national level with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, We work with the Japanese American Citizens League. We are very active with the Indian American Muslim Council. We work with, ethnically Muslim, Asiatic Muslim groups like, Free Uyghur Now, Uyghur World Congress. And so we're really trying to spread the outreach of groups that we do engage with. And if there's a coalition that you think we should be working with, we really do want to. I think it's really important to, I saw that District 1 question, and, maybe we need to do some civic engagement trainings down in District 1, just to, get the community prepared and ready and think about what we can do in the next election. There was some concerns and questions about pro-Israel groups, and how they will continue to pressure the Trump administration to forget some gains they made with the Muslim community. And I can only say that if we do nothing, we cede the table. And so, Trump respects power. We need to build Muslim power. We're going to be reaching out to the Trump administration to let them know what we want. You have to let people know what you want. You just can't sit back and say they're not doing what I want. So we CAIR as a 501c3. We will always make the intentions and the wants and the desires of the Muslim community known. Now, whether people listen to us, that's on them, but we also see the results of what happens when you don't listen to us. So I think there's a lot to be said about engaging with this or any administration, making clear what we want, and hopefully developing a long-term, flow of communication. Are there any questions in the chat?
There's quite a few questions. Robert, if you want to scroll through, maybe you could take the lead on this. There's a question about whether we work with the Green Party. So as a C3, CAIR does not favor one party over another. But we do obviously encourage the community to volunteer, to be engaged, to see where you can step in and help. I don't know if you want to talk more about the C3, C4.
Yeah. I mean, CAIR consistently engages in political messaging to the effect that we call on all parties and candidates to listen to the concerns of the Muslim community. And we encourage Muslims to give the three things that get candidates' attention the most: their votes, their volunteering hours, and their money. Support candidates that you believe are going to, accomplish good things, just like I would hope you would support CAIR because you think we're accomplishing good things. But we will reach out equally to any party when we have a direct demand on candidates. And so we would reach out to the Green Party just like we would then reach out to Republicans or Democrats. Other questions? I see one. Have been doing that, still am. Great. That is exactly what we want.
There is a question, would you dilute your brand with CAIR action and fear losing core competencies, stretching too thin? So just to clarify, and there's been a lot of questions about this because we're very excited that CAIR action is now active in Maryland. So the C3 and C4 are two different entities. The C3, C4 are two different entities. Robert, you could probably take this more if you want to dive into a little bit about, if there's any concerns about losing core competencies or stretching our work too thin.
Sure. Usually, and I'm not speaking for CAIR and CAIR Action's relationship, or CAIR and a local CAIR Action, CAIR the C3 and the local CAIR Action chapter office. But usually what happens just in the C3, C4 space, when a C3 has an affiliated C4, you engage at the very highest leadership level, discussions on, what are your strategic priorities? What are your missions? What are your activities? And while there will be some overlap in general mission of getting out the vote or both speaking out to the same issue, that's just building wider community attention and concern to issues. Usually the activities of the C4 are covering the activities that the C3 cannot engage in. A C3 is limited in how much lobbying it can do. A C4 has unrestricted lobbying. A C3 gets tax deductible donations, but a C4 doesn't. But they are able to endorse political candidates. And so what happens is the work of a C3 might be more educational, and a work of a C4 could be more in the advocacy or political space. I can say because the size of CAIR as a C3, I can engage in lobbying 100% of my time or advocacy on Capitol Hill, and that really doesn't affect our quota of how much we can. But as CAIR grows as an organization, we will be evaluating just how we align our strategic priorities and how we allocate time and resources on what projects. But going back to what Brother Nihad said, what Brother Jameel said, but Sister Samya said, we shouldn't operate out of a mentality of resource scarcity where we don't think there's enough money to actually staff a C3 or a C4 from the community. The Muslim community every year gives over $2 billion in donations to charities, the majority of which is going overseas. If we did a small fraction of that just to our domestic Muslim charities, I promise you I could, after several successful years of lobbying, get Congress to reallocate where we're dumping our foreign affairs, spending into more development programs and hopefully less weapons helping people. And that would definitely make up the difference. And so I'd encourage the community not to operate out of a mentality of resource scarcity or do we have enough? We definitely have enough. It's more prioritization. Do we as a community prioritize our domestic politics and do we see its connections to what happens overseas? Nihad actually was involved in a lot of these conversations though. So anything to add, brother?
Well, sorry,
I saw your camera go on and off, so I wasn't sure if you were jumping in.
My phone acted up. Can you repeat the comment or question?
Oh, we were just talking about does a C4 take away from the C3 in time or resources or spending? But I was saying, we're growing together.
Yeah.
I mean, our community cannot grow, politically speaking, unless it has the vehicles to achieve its goals. C3 is very limited in its advocacy, advocacy work, legal work, public relations, community relations, and CAIR, alhamdulillah, has been successful tremendously in this area. But we are at a level where the Muslim community needs to develop the C4. And we have C4 that has been established for many years, but have not been as active now. And I think the advantage of having a C4 in CAIR's name is the brand, the trust, the authenticity, and the credibility, and also the legacy of sticking to our principles. We were not, and we will not be any outfit of any political party. We are an outfit of the American Muslim community, will continue to promote its interests and revolve around the interests of the community. So I believe we're also responding to a long-term need by the community and push for CAIR to establish a C4. And everywhere we go, people ask, where is the Muslim APAC? Or the Muslim APAC, the Muslim PAC is at our tips, and the C4, the CAIR PAC, and the Super PAC are really the vehicles where the community needs not to test. It has been tested, and those who believe more in political work than other works, they can give. We have learned in the past year that the Muslim community was really fired up to do the C4 work, and they were even giving more money than they have given to the C3, because we discovered that the Muslim community is really anxious and waiting for the Muslim community to develop a platform where they trust and start to move forward. So that's really a sign of maturity, and we're always concerned about, obviously, limiting our resources, but the community always surprises us with its generosity, openness, and futuristic horizon to support the development of the American Muslim political vehicles, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. All right. So just because I respect everyone's time, I'm going to ask for final thoughts and words as we're moving forward. We kind of heard that now, but just, something that you think will uplift the spirits, give us hopes, and something to rally behind. No pressure. Brother Jameel.
I would say very simply, and we know this from the Quran and Sunnah, unity of our community is key. As the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother or sister what they love for themselves. So as we are dealing with any of these policy issues, no matter where we're coming from, our background, we have to work together on them to help each other, and you know, work in a unified manner. And that when the success, because we know the success only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we do that, I strongly believe the success will come.
All right, Sister Samya.
Final thoughts would be that, you know, democracy, they kept saying was going to be, you know, the price of the election. Democracy is not saved during an election. It is saved by the actions we do day to day. So for everyone here who cares, this is the opportunity to work and be involved in your community to make sure that your elected officials are listening to you. And I would also say that this is an opportunity for us to make sure that we are engaged not only with national politics, but this is a time to get involved in our local politics, because that's where we will, inshallah, make the most impact moving forward.
Thank you so much, brother. Sister Zainab. Oh, and you're on mute. Got you. It was you this time.
Always have to find that mute button. I think pretty much everything's been said. The key point is just not to get discouraged, to keep our faith in Allah, keep our trust in Allah. Every test has a purpose for it. And I think one of the burning questions of our time is, what are we willing to sacrifice? What are we willing to do to make a difference, to have an impact? And it can be very overwhelming when we look at the larger picture, but if you focus locally within your own sphere of influence, it becomes much more manageable. Identifying ways that you can have a difference or make a difference or have an impact within your own circle, within your own community, within your own child school system, you know, that can really help to inspire you to continue moving forward. We obviously are still in the midst of this horrific genocide in Gaza. And when we take our pain and we translate it into our passion and turn our passion into our purpose, it really enables us to turn that energy into a more constructive direction, inshallah. So we will get through this. We have been here before, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you, inshallah, to continue advocating for building Muslim political power.
I would just add that, you know, in the 13 years I've been with CAIR, I have seen Muslims become more powerful. I have seen the professionalization of our institutions. I have seen power building. I've seen us go from less than 1 million voters to over 2.5 in the national headlines. Just keep on calling about what are we going to do and what are we saying and what do we want. I continue to see the rise of Muslim candidates, where we now have just about or over 250 elected Muslim officials across the country. And, you know, this is just the beginning. I'm working for the next 30 years, and I want to leave my kids a very powerful Muslim community with institutions that, you know, will carry their grandchildren into the future and continue to make America a great place for everyone, especially the Muslim community. And so I do that knowing that I've worked at a nonprofit that is just dedicated to empowering and protecting Muslims. And in doing so, we follow that golden rule: do unto others what you want done unto you. And so we're going to be allies to any impacted community, whether it's this administration or another administration, because when we protect someone else's rights, we protect our rights and vice versa. And so with that, I'm going to give it to Brother Nihad, who is really one of the key architects of all this Muslim power building, someone I learned a lot from. Brother Nihad.
Jazakumullah khair. I loved everything I heard tonight from all of our inspiring, mashallah, leaders and speakers, and also the inspiring and very thoughtful questions. I don't want to dodge any question or any comment. There was a last comment about do not become the Muslim APAC. Yes, we will not. We will become, inshallah, the Muslim pack that will rectify policies and will right the wrong and will defend the rights of everyone. We are going to bring morality, ethics, values to our policies and politics. All I will ask our community and myself is always leave that comfortable space and trust in Allah. Don't just keep doing what you're doing if you can do more or better, or even if you can give more and more a blessing. So always learn new things and be ready to do not only more things, but new things, because in that you are going to be pioneers. In that you are going to strengthen the community. In that's where you fill a vacuum that has not been filled. And you do a responsibility that our community has not for a long time. This genocide has awakened our community and the world. And I love what Sister Zainab said. We have to turn our pain into passion and our passion into power. And that would require us to leave that comfort zone and invest with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Last thing I would say, I truly look forward to seeing you at the 30th anniversary gala. If you have not registered, what are you waiting for? I would love to see you there. If you can bring families, try to bring new people who have not been at CAIR's function, and inspire them. I assure you, inshallah, with Allah's help, that this gala is going to be very inspirational. And if you can bring your teenagers with you, your families and friends, that's how we set the tone, inshallah, a tone of hopefulness, a tone of passion, a tone of power. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Jazakallah khair for joining tonight's program. Inshallah, we're going to build power together.
All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyid al-Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. On behalf of CAIR, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to tonight's webinar. Thank you for joining us for this post-election debrief. We know that this particular election cycle has brought on many emotions. It's raised a lot of concerns for our communities, and particularly for Muslims and marginalized groups who know, unfortunately, all too well, the fascist kind of policies that have come down from the previous Trump administration. But we want to reassure you that regardless of the outcome, we are here to come together to share our thoughts and to look forward to a future with resilience and with purpose. So today's discussion is intended to really offer insights and analysis of the election's outcomes and explore what this could mean for our communities. It's also about reaffirming the strength within our community and identifying positive and constructive steps forward.